Hello. So we are going to read chapter 20 today. I want to do a quick recap of chapters um, 18 and 19. First off, if you have not read 18 and 19, you skipped out on yesterday's Ed puzzle or something like that, stop. Don't go any farther. You need to go back and do 18 and 19. They're probably the two chapters where the biggest amount of information is thrown at you that is going to dramatically change the course of this book. So if you haven't read those, stop and go back and do that before you keep going. Now, chapter 18 and 19, we have a lot of information that is shared with us. First, we find out what happens when twins are born in Jonas's community. Well, actually, first we find out that Jonas realizes as part of his job and the part of his rule that he can ask any questions, he can watch a release. And he happens to mention that his dad is going to be releasing one of the twins, and the giver says, well, let's watch it. And so they watch the release of the twin, and it means something very different than what Jonas anticipated, and he's very, very upset. Then we find out that the previous receiver of memory was named Rosemary, and we find out a little bit more about what happened with her and why she really was struggling, and we get the information at the very end of 19 that she requested release because she couldn't handle the job of receiver. And we find out that, at least in those two cases, release is pretty terrible. And we don't know yet whether that's what release means every time or whether it's just release in those two situations. But we ended chapter 19 with Jonas beside himself, upset, crying, so disturbed by what he's found out. And that's exactly where we pick up with chapter 20. And tons happens today too. So let's get into it. Chapter 20. I won't go home. You can't make me, Jonas sobbed and shouted and pounded the bed with his fist. Sit up, Jonas, the giver told him firmly. Jonas obeyed him, weeping, shuddering. He sat on the edge of the bed. He would not look at the giver. You may stay here tonight. I want to talk to you, but you must be quiet now while I notify your family unit. No one must hear you cry. Jonas looked up wildly. No one heard that little twin cry either. No one but my father. He collapsed again in sobs. The giver waited silently, and finally Jonas was able to quiet himself and sat huddled with his shoulders shaking. The giver went to the wall speaker and clicked the switch to on. Yes, receiver, how may I help you? Notify the new receiver's family unit that he will be staying with me tonight for additional training. I will take care of that, sir. Thank you for your instructions, the voice said. I will take care of that, sir. I will take care of that, sir, Jonas mimicked in a cruel, sarcastic voice. I'll do whatever you like, sir. I'll kill people, sir. Old people, sir. Small newborn people. I'd be happy to kill them, sir. Thank you for your instructions, sir. How may I help you? He couldn't seem to stop. The giver grasped his shoulders firmly, and Jonas fell silent and stared at him. Listen to me, Jonas. They can't help it. They know nothing. You said that to me once before. I said it because it's true. It's the way they live. It's the life that we have created that was created for them. It's the same life that you would have if you had not been chosen as my successor. But he lied to me, Jonas wept. It's what he was told to do. He knows nothing else. So who is the he here? He lied to me. Who is that we're talking about? Who is Jonas so upset at when he says, but he lied to me? Who is he upset about lying? You're right. It's his dad. So his dad says, oh, this is what release is. And when Jonas watches it, it's something really different. And so he's mad at his dad. He feels like his dad has been lying to him about what it really means. It's what he was told to do, and he knows nothing else. What about you? Do you lie to me too? Jonas almost spat the question at the giver. I'm empowered to lie, but I've never lied to you. Jonas stared at him. Release, is it always like that? For people who break the rules 3 times? For the old, do they kill the old too? Yes, it's true, said the giver. And what about Fiona? She loves the old. She's in training to care for them. Does she know yet? What will she do when she finds out? How will she feel? Jonas brushed wetness from his face with the back of his hand. Fiona is already being trained in the fine art of release, the giver told him. She is very efficient at her work, your red-haired friend. Feelings are not part of the life that she has learned. Jonas wrapped his arms around himself and rocked his own body back and forth. What should I do? I can't go back. I can't. The giver stood up. Ooh, look, there's a typo right there. The giver stood up. First, I will order our evening meal, and then we will eat. Jonas found himself using that nasty, sarcastic voice again. Then we will have the sharing of feelings. The giver gave him a rueful, anguished, empty laugh. Jonas, you and I are the only ones who have feelings. We have been sharing them now for almost a year. I'm sorry, giver, Jonas said miserably. I don't mean to be so hateful, not to you. The giver rubbed Jonas's hunched shoulders. And after we eat, he went on, we'll make a plan. Jonas looked up puzzled. A plan for what? There's nothing we can do. It's always been this way, before me, before you, before the ones who came before you, back and back and back. His voice trailed the familiar phrase. Jonas, the giver said after a moment, it is true that it has always been this way for what seems like forever, but the memories tell us that it has not always been. People felt things once. You and I have been a part of that. So we know that they felt things like pride and sorrow and love, Jonas added, remembering the family scene that had so affected him, and pain, and he thought again of the soldier. The worst part of holding the memories is not the pain, it's the loneliness of it. Memories need to be shared. I've started to share them with you, Jonas said, trying to cheer him. That's true, and having you here with me over the past year has made me realize that things must change. For years I have felt that they should, but it seems so hopeless. And now, for the first time, I think there might be a way. The giver said slowly, and you brought it to my attention barely, he glanced at the clock, 2 hours ago. Jonas watched him and listened. So, there's a little bit of a pause here, a time lapse. It was late at night now, and they had talked, and Jonas sat wrapped in the robe belonging to the giver, the long robe that only the elders wore. It was possible what they'd planned, barely possible. If it failed, he would likely be killed. But what did it matter? If he stayed, his life was no longer worth living. Yes, he told the giver, I'll do it. I think I can do it. I'll try anyway. But I want you to come with me. The giver shook his head. Jonas, he said, the community has depended all these generations back and back and back on a resident receiver to hold their memories for them, and I've turned over many of them to you in the past year. I can't take them back. There is no way for me to get them back if I have given them. So if you escape, once you're gone, and Jonas, you know that you can never return. Jonas nodded solemnly. That was the terrifying part. Yes, he said, I know. But if you come with me, and the giver shook his head and made a gesture to silence him, he continued, if you get away, if you get beyond, if you get to elsewhere, it will mean that the community has to bear the burden themselves of the memories that you have been holding for them. I think that they can, and that they will require some wisdom, but it will be desperately hard for them. I said that wrong. I think they can, and that they will acquire some wisdom, but it will be desperately hard for them. When we lost Rosemary 10 years ago, her memories returned to the people and they panicked. And those were just such few memories compared to yours. When your memories return, they will need help. Remember how I helped you in the beginning when the receiving of memories was new to you? Jonas nodded. It was scary at first and it hurt a lot. And you needed me then. And now they will. It's no use. They'll find someone to take my place. They'll choose a new receiver. There's no one ready for training, not right away. Oh, they'll speed up the selection, of course, but I can't think of another child who has the right qualities. There's a little female with pale eyes, but she's only a 6. That's correct. I know the one you mean. Her name is Catherine, but she's too young. So they will be forced to bear the memories. So when it says they will be forced to bear the memories, who are we talking about? Who is the they that we're talking about that's going to have to bear the memories? Over there. Answer. I want you to come, giver, Jonas pleaded. No, I have to stay here, the giver said firmly. I want to, Jonas. If I go with you, and together we take all of their protection from the memories, Jonas, the community will be left with no one to help them. They will be thrown into chaos. They'll destroy themselves. I can't go. Giver, Jonas suggested, you and I don't need to care about the rest of them. The giver looked at him with a questioning smile, and Jonas hung his head. Of course they needed to care. It was the meaning of everything. And in any case, Jonas, the giver sighed, I wouldn't make it. I'm very weakened now. Did you know that I no longer see colors? Jonas's heart broke. He reached for the giver's hand. You have the colors, the giver told him, and the courage, and I will help you to have the strength. A year ago, Jonas reminded him, When I had just become a 12, when I had begun to first see color, you told me that the beginning had been different for you, but that I wouldn't understand." And the giver brightened. "That's true. And do you know, Jonas, that with all your knowledge now and all your memories and all you've learned, you still won't understand, because I've been a little selfish and I haven't given any of it to you. I wanted to keep it for myself to the last." "Keep what?" "When I was just a boy, younger than you now, it began to come to me. But it wasn't seeing beyond for me. It was different. For me, it was hearing beyond." Jonas frowned, trying to figure that out. "What did you hear?" he asked. "Music," the giver said, smiling. "I began to hear something truly remarkable, and it is called music. I'll give you some before I go." Jonas shook his head emphatically. "No, giver," he said. "I want you to keep that, to have it with you when I'm gone." So how did the giver know that he was able to receive? He couldn't see beyond. He could hear beyond. What did he hear over there? Answer that. So these three little dots tell us that time has passed. Jonas went home the next morning. Cheerfully he greeted his parents, and he lied easily about what a busy, pleasant night he had had. His father smiled and lied, too, about what a busy, pleasant day he'd had the day before. Throughout the school day, as he did his lessons, Jonas went over the plan in his head. It seemed startlingly simple. Jonas and the giver had gone over it and over it late into the night hours. So this is now going to lay out the plan of what they think they're going to do to try to start changing the community. Here's the plan. For the next 2 weeks, as the time for the December ceremony approached, the giver would transfer every memory of courage and strength he could to Jonas. He would need those to help him find the elsewhere that they both were sure existed. They knew it would be a very difficult journey. Then, in the middle of the night before the ceremony, Jonas would secretly leave his dwelling. This was probably the most dangerous part, because it was a violation of a major rule for any citizen not on official business to leave a dwelling at night. "I'll leave at midnight," Jonas said. "The food collectors will be finished picking up the evening meal remains by then, and the path maintenance crews don't start their work that early, so there shouldn't be anyone who'd see me, unless, of course, someone is out on emergency business." "I don't know what you should do if you are seen, Jonas," the giver said. "I have memories, of course, of all kinds of escapes, but people fleeing from terrible things throughout history, but every situation is individual, and there is no memory like this one." "I'll be careful," Jonas said. "No one will see me." "As a receiver in training, you are held in very high respect already, so I don't think you would be questioned very forcefully. I would just say that I was on an important errand for the receiver. I'd say it was your fault that I was out after hours," Jonas teased. And they both laughed a little nervously. Jonas was certain that he could slip away, unseen, from his house, carrying an extra set of clothing. Silently, he would take his bicycle to the riverbank and leave it there, hidden in the bushes with the clothing folded beside it. Then he would make his way through the darkness on foot, silently, to the annex. "There's no nighttime attendant," the giver explained. I'll leave the door unlocked, and you will simply slip into the room, and I will be waiting for you." His parents would discover when they woke that he was gone. They would also find a cheerful note from Jonas on his bed, telling them that he was going for an early morning ride along the river, and that he would be back before the ceremony started. His parents would be irritated, but not alarmed. They would think him inconsiderate, and they would plan to chastise him later. They would wait with mounting anger for him to return, and then finally they'd be forced to go, taking Lily to the ceremony without him. "They won't say anything to anyone, though," Jonas was quite certain about this. "They won't call attention to my rudeness, because it would reflect on their parenting. And anyway, everyone is so involved in the ceremony that they probably won't notice that I'm not there. Now that I am a 12 and in training, I don't have to sit with my age group anymore. So Asher will think I'm with my parents or with you, and your parents will assume you're with Asher or with me." Jonas shrugged. "It will take everyone a while to realize that I'm not there at all. And you and I will be long on our way by then." Early in the morning, the giver would order a vehicle and a driver from the speaker. He visited other communities frequently, meeting with their elders. His responsibilities extended all over the surrounding areas, so this would not be an unusual undertaking. Ordinarily, the giver did not attend the December ceremony. Last year, he had been present because of the occasion of Jonas's selection, in which he was so involved. But his life was usually quite separate from that of the community, so no one would comment on his absence or the fact that he had chosen this day to be away. When the driver and the vehicle arrived, the giver would send the driver on some brief errand. During his absence, the giver would help Jonas hide in the storage area of the vehicle, so like hide in the trunk. Jonas would have with him, a bundle of food which the giver would save from his own meals during the next 2 weeks. The ceremony would begin with all of the community there, and by then, Jonas and the giver would be on their way. By midday, Jonas's absence would become apparent and would be a cause for serious concern. The ceremony could not be disrupted, though. Such a disruption would be unthinkable, but searchers would be sent out into the community. By the time his bicycle and clothing were found, the giver would be returning, and Jonas by then would be on his own, making his journey to elsewhere. The giver on his return would find the community in a state of confusion and panic, confronted by a situation that they'd never faced before, and having no memories from which to find either solace or wisdom. So they would not know what to do, and they would seek his advice. He would go to the auditorium where the people would be gathered, and he would stride to the stage and command their attention. He would make the solemn announcement that Jonas had been lost in the river, and would immediately begin the ceremony of loss. "Jonas, Jonas," they would say loudly, as they had once said the name of Caleb, and then the giver would lead the chant, and together they would let Jonas's presence in their lives fade away as they said his name in unison, more slowly and softer, until he was disappearing from them, until he was no more than an occasional murmur, and then, by the end of that long day, gone forever, he would never be mentioned again. Their attention would then turn to the overwhelming task of bearing the memories themselves, and the giver would help. So that's all the plan. Jonas is going to try to escape, try to get to elsewhere. That will then release the memories out into the community. Is the giver going to run away with Jonas? Answer now. Is the giver running away with Jonas? No, he is not. He is going to stay and help the community deal with all of the memories that come flooding back. "Yes, I understand that they'll need you," Jonas had said at the end of the lengthy discussion and planning, "but I need you too. Please come with me." He knew the answer even as he made this final plea. "My work will be finished," the giver had replied gently, "when I have helped the community to change and become whole. I'm grateful to you, Jonas, because without you I would have never figured out a way to bring about the change. But your role now is to escape, and my role is to stay." But don't you want to be with me, giver?" Jonas asked sadly. The giver hugged him. "I love you, Jonas," he said, "but I have another place to go. When my work here is finished, I want to be with my daughter." Jonas had been staring glumly at the floor, and now he looked up, startled. "I didn't know you had a daughter, giver. You told me you had a spouse, but I never knew about your daughter." The giver smiled and nodded, and for the first time in their long months together, Jonas saw him look truly happy. "Her name was Rosemary," the giver said. So now we find out at the end that all those things that we heard about Rosemary and all of those really, really difficult things that we know about Rosemary's release and her suffering and all of that, that was the giver's daughter. And he watched her go through all of that and has been living with all of that for 10 years. And now at this end here, he says, "I can't go with you, Jonas. I need to be with my daughter." It's so sad. It's so sad. And I don't even know what to do with it. All right, that's the plan. Jonas is going to go try to escape. The giver is going to stay and help the community. I'm leaving you on another cliffhanger, just like Mrs. Myers did yesterday. We will finish this in just a couple days. Stay tuned. More coming tomorrow. Just think about the poor giver. He's been missing his daughter all these years. All right. Okay, have a good day. We are going to finish this up soon.